Hello, good morning, and a very happy new year to you all. I hope the holiday season has been treating you well and is treating you well, no matter how you celebrate. Honestly, lately, I haven't been posting. It's been kind of hard to find motivation to put any story together, let alone record and then do everything else that comes along with it. But I think I'm back. I've been super busy, a bit under the weather here and there, but the motivation and excitement have graciously returned. So the story I chose today is one that local news covered a bit, but I don't remember it gripping any national media. And then in my research, I couldn't find hardly any resources covering it other than a few local news outlets. And it's mind-boggling, to say the least. Just when you think you figured it out, everything changes. This is the murder of Jannell Martensen. My name is Eli, and this is Murder in the Morning. My sources for today come from Legacy.com, The Spokesman Review, KHQ.com, KREM.com, CBS, and any others I will put down below. Now, typically, or at least in my last 40 episodes or so, I've aimed to have a purpose for telling these stories. And for the most part, that is sharing unsolved cases in the hopes that we simply don't forget them and may possibly find answers to. This story is different. It happened only in the last couple years, and the case has been solved. But I want to draw your attention to taking women seriously when they tell you they're in danger. Okay? I don't understand how this remains such a rampant issue, but here we are. Alrighty. 49-year-old Jannell Martensen was in an on-again, off-again relationship with 37-year-old Colton Russell for about 7 years. The nature of their relationship was that of abuse. Russell had been known to mentally, emotionally, and physically berate her, and even once drove her out into the woods of Spokane County, beat her up, and then left her there. There were many more incidents like that. Quote, a police report filed on April 13th of 2021 detailed bruising to Jannell's face, but she told officers that she'd been in a car crash and later changed the story to say that she had a fight with a cousin, end quote. But again, it was Russell. Over the years, Jannell had tried to leave him and get help, but leaving an abusive relationship can be the single hardest thing to do for some people, and unless you've experienced that, I doubt the pain and fear can be understood. According to KXLY.com, Russell and Martensen ended their relationship officially in June of 2023. She moved out and moved in with a friend. Not long after, Kiara Morgan Wayland, who was 23, entered the picture as Russell's new girlfriend. Despite breaking up, Jannell didn't stay away from Russell, and on November 2nd of 2023, she texted a friend and told him Russell, quote, just hit me so fucking hard, end quote. And on November 18th of 2023, Jannell then told her roommate that she and Russell were going camping somewhere, which the roommate found very odd. One, it being November and cold, and two, they were supposed to be separated. The pair took Russell's pickup truck, and that was the last time Martensen was seen alive. During the wee morning hours the next day, Jannell texted 3 different people, which went as follows. Quote, redacted, are you there? I'm scared to death. Please come get me. He passed out back for a minute. Please. I'm afraid he's going to kill me. Please. End quote. Number 2, redacted. Please come get me. I'm scared to death, and I promise everyone I will never ever go around him again, but he's on lots of Xanax and threatening me with a gun. End quote. Number 3, redacted. I promise you on everything I will never ever fuck with him again. I swear on everything. Just please come get me. He lives on redacted. Please, I know I've said it before, but I swear to you, I will never ever mess with him again. I mean it with every part of me. I am so scared. I am so fucking scared. End quote. Days later, when Jannell never showed up to her family's Thanksgiving, reality began to set in for those who loved her. According to her obituary on Legacy.com, Jannell Jolene Martensen was born in Spokane at Sacred Heart Hospital on March 31st of 1974 to a Joel Martensen and Jackie Arano. She was the youngest of 5 siblings, and the family resided on a Palouse farm where Jannell rode horses, dressed up in her grandmother's gowns, and played in a nearby creek. She attended the Liberty School District in her childhood and graduated from Lewis and Clark School. Afterward, she received her dental assistant certification from Spokane Community College, and during these years, she would give birth to a daughter named Shelby Martensen Wright with a man named Kevin Wright. Later, she had a son named William and was known to be a loving, kind mother. Not only that, but she was a great friend to many and loved everyone in her life, including her parents, step-parents, siblings, uncles, aunts, nieces, nephews, cousins. Simply a good person. So, after nobody had heard from her on Thanksgiving and the days after, Jannell's cousin, Alicia G., worried for her, went to look for Jannell after the holidays events had fizzled out. She headed to everyone's first assumption, Mr. Colton Russell. KHQ.com reported, quote, "He looked like he wanted to kill me," she said. "He looked so gray and mad. I went to his house and he kept his head down like this the whole time." She said that Martensen wasn't there, but her phone was. Quote, "She would have never missed Thanksgiving or any holiday," she said. Like I said before, her family says no one had heard from Martensen since she claimed she and Russell were going camping. "It was very strange," the cousin said. "I had never heard of either of them going camping, and especially in November, that's weird." She continued, "It was one of the many things that were very odd over the years in their relationship. Quote, but she loved him and I don't know why. He had this hold over her," end quote. As the days went on, no one heard a word from Jannell. As for Russell, he started acting quite strange. KXLY writes, "In the following days, when friends questioned Russell about Jannell's disappearance, he changed his story frequently, saying he had last seen her with different people. Then his mother helped him clean the apartment he was living in and moved him into a motel. A search warrant would later uncover blood on a sponge and a blood-like substance on large sections of carpet and the walls of his apartment, despite those areas being cleaned. That warrant also revealed that Kiara Morgan Wayland had searched on Google and YouTube, quote, for serial killer couples and how to dispose of dead bodies. I mean, boom, instant red flag. Moving, cleaning, Googling how to get rid of dead bodies. If you're not the killer, then why all the fuss, Russ? On December 8th, weeks after Jannell was last seen alive, Russell reached out to his friend Brandon Kenny, who was 25, asking for help to move an old, rusty toolbox. Russell told his friend Kenny that the toolbox was filled with concrete, hence why he needed the help. Suspicious, but not overly, Kenny agreed to help and headed to his friend's home. However, when Kenny arrived, he stumbled into the worst day of his life. Quote, according to court documents, Kenny told police he went to Russell's house and found him crying on the couch. Russell told Kenny he, quote, accidentally killed Jannell, and then Kenny told police that Russell threatened him with a gun and told him he had to move her body or he would be killed too, end quote. So Kenny did. He helped Russell load this toolbox with a deceased human being into the bed of his Silverado truck, and they began to drive. Where Russell ever planned on going, I don't know, because they didn't make it far before his truck broke down on some random property just off the road. He told the homeowners of this property that he would call a tow truck and be back soon. However, Russell would never make that call because he couldn't afford to. It was reported he reached out to his mother multiple times that day, evening, and night, begging her for some cash to move the truck, but she wasn't having it. When Kenny went home that night after quite the day, he felt afraid for his own life. What if Russell planned on killing him too, since he knew of the murder? And what if the police found out, since they never actually hid the body, and traced it back to Kenny? This ate away at Kenny, and by the next morning, he decided to do something about it. That day, and it's unclear how or why, but he met up with Russell on Cleveland Avenue and Cuba Street in Minnehaha, which is a small residential neighborhood within Spokane. Russell was in his car, accompanied by his new girlfriend, Kiara, when Kenny approached. Without hesitation, Kenny pulled out a gun and fired multiple shots through the window at Russell, killing him. Kiara scrambled to open the passenger door and started fleeing down the road. Out of bullets or afraid to draw additional attention, Kenny chased after her on foot. She made it around the corner before Kenny caught up and began to stab her. And he continued to stab her over 50 times. Kenny fled the scene, of course, and when the police arrived, they thought exactly what I was thinking. Russell was our best lead to find Jannell, and now he's been murdered along with his girlfriend. What is happening? Jannell had last been seen with Russell, and now Russell's dead. But it wouldn't take long to connect this crime scene back to Brandon Kenny, and when they arrested him on suspicion of murder, he immediately confessed to the double homicide. Now, guess how they connected this crime scene to Kenny? It was all caught on ring cameras up and down the road. Just the most residential area of normal, middle-aged, suburban, most likely white families with ring cameras. So they had plenty to go on. During his confession, investigators finally learned the truth about Jannell. They learned of Russell threatening Kenny after confessing to accidentally murdering Jannell, even though we know that's not true. And then Kenny told police exactly where they could find Jannell, and on December 14th, police recovered the toolbox in which Jannell had been placed. After an autopsy, it was determined that blunt force trauma was Jannell's cause of death, although I don't believe investigators ever recovered the actual murder weapon. And as of today, I don't believe this case has gone to trial yet, and if it has, not a single paper has covered it. Back in 2023, he had his first hearing and then a second trial hearing, but I couldn't find any trial date. But in the meantime, he has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. And behind all of that smoke, the real story today is about Jannell, not this killer killing killers. Her cousin, Alicia G., says, quote, Jannell was kind, generous, and loved her family. She was a mother, a grandmother, and a dear friend to many. Alicia wants Jannell remembered for the way she lived, not the way she died. Jannell was a good person, she said. She had a good heart. So good, in fact, that her cousin fears she was forgiving to a fault and urges anyone out there in any kind of relationship where they feel uncomfortable to get help. She says, I hope a young girl sees this, or not even a young girl, a woman, a child, anyone in a domestic violence situation, and they reach out for help now after hearing this story, she said. End quote. I hope so too. Those situations are horribly tricky and too often deadly. And that, my friends, is the terrifying murder of Jannell Martensen. I really appreciate you all so much for listening in today, and I thank you for your continued support, truly. If you'd like a little bit extra true crime today, I invite you to stick around after the music. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Alrighty. We have an exciting and ongoing update to the decades-old Herb Baumeister case. This is titled, quote, All of Indiana's serial killer's victims could be identified as renewed investigative push plays out in laboratories of CBS News. CBS Crime News. Quote, Decades after investigators unearthed thousands of human bones and bone fragments on a suspected Indiana serial killer's property, a renewed quest is playing out in laboratories to solve a long-running mystery. Who were they? A new team working to identify the unknown dead says that the key to their success will be getting relatives of men who vanished between the mid-1980s and the mid-1990s to provide samples of DNA. Those samples can then be screened against DNA profiles scientists are extracting from the bones and the bone fragments, which were found starting in 1996 on Herb Baumeister's sprawling suburban Indianapolis property. The original investigators believed that at least 25 people were buried at his 18-acre Fox Hollow farm estate in Westfield, based on evidence that included 10,000 bones and bone fragments, as well as handcuffs and shotgun shells. Baumeister, a 49-year-old thrift store owner and married father of 3, killed himself in Canada in July 1996 before police could question him, taking with him many secrets, including the names of his presumed victims. Bastard. Investigators believe that while his family was away on trips, Baumeister, who frequented gay bars in Indianapolis, lured men to his home where he killed and buried them. By the late 1990s, authorities had identified 8 men using dental records and available DNA technologies. But then those efforts stopped, although the remains of at least 17 people may have still been unidentified. Hamilton County Coroner Jeff Jellison said that the renewed identification effort revealed that county officials at the time decided not to fund additional DNA testing, which, quote, essentially halted further efforts to identify the victims and placed the cost of a homicide investigation on family members of missing people, end quote. As decades slipped by, the bones and bone fragments sat in boxes at the University of Indianapolis Human Identification Center, whose staff helped excavate the remains. That changed after one Eric Pranger sent Jellison a Facebook message in late 2022. The Indianapolis man's family had long believed his older cousin, Alan Livingston, was among Baumeister's victims. Alan Livingston was 27 when he vanished in August of 1993 after getting into someone else's car in downtown Indianapolis. After hearing about Baumeister 3 years later, his mother, Sharon, and other relatives began suspecting that Alan, who was bisexual, was among his victims. Jellison was about to take office when Eric Pranger asked if he could help get some answers for his aunt, who had serious health problems at the time. Jellison said, "How do you say no to that? That's our job as coroners by statute, to identify the deceased." And in late 2022, police took DNA samples from Sharon Livingston and one of her daughters. Jellison then began working with a team that included the Indiana State Police, the FBI, the Human Identification Center, local law enforcement, and a private company that specializes in forensic genetic genealogy. Staff at the Human Identification Center, where the remains are stored in a temperature and humidity-controlled space, selected some of the most promising bones for DNA analysis. At the Indiana State Police Laboratory, scientists cut out sections of these bones, froze them with liquid nitrogen, and pulverized them into a fine powder. They then used heat and chemicals to break open bone cells in the first step towards extracting a full DNA profile. Now, that's the first time I'd ever heard of the actual process, which is kind of neat. Anyways, nearly a year after hearing from Eric Pranger, Jellison announced in October of 2023 that a 9th Baumeister victim had been identified, Alan Livingston. Sharon Livingston finally received some form of closure as she died in November of 2024, just afterwards. Eric Pranger said, "It made me happy to be able to do this for my aunt. I'm the one who got the ball rolling to bring her son home after 30 years, and I felt privileged." He continued, "After Alan was identified, I was so excited. But after the fact, I asked myself, now what? I have answers, but what about the other families?" Jellison said about 40 DNA samples have been submitted by people who believe a missing male relative may have been linked to Baumeister. He said those are entered into the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, but are used solely for identifying missing people. To date, scientists have extracted 8 unique DNA profiles, all male, from more than 70 of the 100 bones that were sent to the Indiana State Police Lab by Dr. Krista Latham, the Human Identification Center's director. 1 matched DNA samples provided by Livingston's mother and sister, 4 more matched 4 of the 8 men first identified in the 1990s, Jeffrey Jones, Manuel Resendez, Johnny Byer, and Richard Hamilton. The 3 other DNA profiles remain unidentified, and 2 are still undergoing testing. Those 3 have boosted Baumeister's presumed victims to 12. CBS affiliate WTTT-TV reported that the case began in June of 1996 when Herb Baumeister's 15-year-old son discovered a human skull about 60 yards away from their home. The investigation began while Baumeister and his wife of 24 years were in the middle of a divorce. The day after their son found the bones, Baumeister's wife was granted an emergency protective order and custody to keep away from him and the 3 children, to keep him away from her and the 3 children. At the time, Baumeister explained away the discovery, saying it was part of his late father's medical practice. But 3 days after the boy discovered the remains, more were found by Hamilton County firefighters, perplexing investigators. Jellison and his partners say that their identification effort could take several more years to complete. Most of the bones were crushed and or burned, reducing their potential to yield usable DNA. Latham, a professor of biology and anthropology, said bone fragments deemed in poor shape are being held back from the destructive testing process in the hope that future DNA tech can unlock their secrets. As remains are identified, piece by piece, families can opt in to have them cremated and interred at a memorial dedicated in August in Westfield. It included a plaque with the names of the 9 identified victims, with room for more. Linda Znachko, whose nonprofit, Indianapolis-based ministry titled He Knows Your Name, paid for this monument, and she said at the memorial's dedication that this ID campaign, quote, will bring honor to those who lost their lives at the Fox Hollow tragedy, end quote. Remains belonging to Livingston and Jeffrey Jones were added to the memorial's ossuary, and white doves were released during the dedication. Livingston's younger sister, Shannon Dowdy, attended with several relatives, including Eric Pranger. She said it was a relief finally knowing what happened to her brother despite his tragic end. At least you know, she said. Dowdy said, who is now 46, the fear of the unknown is the worst, right? So just knowing, it's a multitude of emotions. You wanted to know, but you didn't want to know, but you needed to know, end quote. And that is where we currently are with Herbert Baumeister and his unknown number of victims, but growing quickly. Whew! Gosh, some of those cases that you hear, I don't know, like when I first started listening to true crime and My Favorite Murder 7 years ago or something, I remember this case vividly, but I was like, oh wow, that's one of these things that it's so infamous, you feel like it's never going to get solved. Like the Zodiac Killer or the Golden State Killer, which was thankfully solved. It's nice to see it all coming to a head. Like, these cases are actually getting solved. All right, that is all I've written down for you folks today. I didn't even write an outro, and normally I do, so I'm probably going to stutter through this, but thank you all so much. I appreciate each and every one of your ears. Have a wonderful, wonderful 2025. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Love you.